Sometimes I wonder whether having this scientific mind is something that really helps us understand existence, or if sometimes it is some sort of a hindering. Because I harbor several doubts about whether understanding the material aspect of the functioning of our brain, understanding all the neurobiological processes involved in consciousness, for instance, is something that will really help us understand the nature of consciousness, or if on the contrary, probably we are misleading our search for knowledge, because consciousness might not be the result of our brain, but on the contrary, our brain be the result of consciousness. It's very interesting that from a metaphysical point of view, what we understand as evolution is exactly the opposite from what we understand from a scientific perspective. From a scientific perspective, we understand evolution as an increasing process of attaining greater and greater levels of complexity, which allow adaptability and everything to evolve in a manner that we may find a very rich and multifarious universe. But from a metaphysical point of view, that is an involutionary process. Multiplicity and this complexity takes us farther and farther away from the one, from unity, from the source of every manifestation. So I would like to state that here we have a very important difference from whether we take a scientifical or a metaphysical attitude. In the first one, we understand the complexities of life as a manifestation of an increasing evolutionary process. From a metaphysical point of view, it is a commandment to undo this, let's say, construction process that the universe follows. That is to say, we are aimed at deconstructing this process from complexity and multiplicity, going backwards towards its origin in the one. Unity, the one, God, Brahman, or any way in which we would like to conceive this totality, this, let's say, invisible oneness from which every realm of existence arises, is the source from which every layer of ontological reality will manifest, but understanding that this process of manifestation is like a descending process, like a descending arc, in which every layer of manifestation, from the, let's say, spiritual to the psychic to the energetic or material level, are decreasing levels of reality. And every process through which we try to undo the constructive process would be an evolutionary process, one in which we are getting rid of all these layers of complexity in a gradual manner, as if we were ascending through this arc back to our origin. So, if we think in this metaphysical manner that everything that we see around us is just a pale reflection of something of a higher order of reality in a very Platonic manner, then we should try to understand that all the complexity that we observe around is a sort of invitation to follow, as if we followed a thread towards the archetypes, towards the metaphysical blueprints out of which all this manifestation arises. In that sense, science teaches us the way in which this degrading process from the one to multiplicity has evolved. But from a spiritual perspective, we are called, it is our goal or our path to follow this process backwards, in which we should first consider how everything in matter and energy works, in order to understand how this evolved, or how this energy and matter is really the result of a manifestation of life, which is in turn a manifestation of the psychic process, and this from consciousness and spirit. So, as you may see, this is quite the opposite of the way in which we have been trained to think in the Western world. For an Eastern traditional mind, it's quite obvious that we are not energy, as many people sustain nowadays. Energy is one of the most basic aspects of our expression, but life is superior to energy, and consciousness is superior to life. What I mean by superior is that something cannot be in the consequence if it's not contained in the antecedent. One may not observe in the manifestation anything that is not potentially contained in the seed of that manifestation. So we cannot reduce ourselves to energy if we are living beings who are also conscious, and not only conscious of our environment, but we are conscious of the fact that we are conscious. This sort of meta-consciousness is something that cannot be contained in matter or in energy. Quite the contrary. Matter and energy are contained in life, are contained in psychic processes. Psychic processes contain them, as consciousness contains them all. So, in this perspective, in this metaphysical perspective, which is the foundation or the grounding of many of the mystical visions of spiritual traditions, what we observe is exactly the opposite direction of understanding everything. Life is something that sustains matter, and consciousness is something that sustains life and matter, but at the same time the spirit is something that contains them all. And so the complexity of life, the complexity of manifestation is really the result of a degrading process in which we are getting farther from this origin, this spiritual origin, of probably what some would call the ineffable. If we accept this metaphysical way of understanding existence, if we accept that the complexities of life, matter, energy are just a degrading manifestation of something of a higher order, closer to oneness, to unity, then at the same time we have to accept that we have the possibility of immediately apprehending this oneness through this manifestation. In order to do that, we should turn our attention from a more discursive and analytic way of thinking towards a symbolic one. Instead of trying to understand existence, being, and whatever might be beyond being from an analytical and conceptual perspective, what we have to do, what we are invited to do, is to change and our understanding process in such a way that we open ourselves to grasp what lies beyond symbols. Everything in the universe, from that perspective, would be a symbol of something of a higher order, closer to the one. In that sense, we have to calm down ourselves and open our heart to just grasp in an immediate manner, in the same way that probably a koan master from the Rinzai tradition in Zen Buddhism would do with a koan, that is to say, to open ourselves to contemplate these symbols in a way that we may grasp in an intellectual, supra-rational manner what lies beyond this manifestation. So, multiplicity on the one hand and oneness on the other in reality are not two, but just the same oneness which is unfolded in a manner that appears to us as a multifarious reality, but which in reality is the same oneness as an ocean which is just one but appears with multiple moving and changing waves. These waves are just manifestations of the same oneness of which they are part and which they are in themselves. And we may train ourselves to observe, to contemplate this multiplicity, these different waves that we understand as an ever-changing reality, just as a manifestation of this one which lies beyond all these appearances that we believe to be many. So the metaphysical invitation is to learn from science in terms of understanding how this multiplicity manifests itself, but then to go beyond science, because we need to undo all this manifesting, degrading process in such a way that we will be able to gradually get rid of all this multiplicity, trying to grasp the unity that lies beyond, and contemplating the symbols that are manifested in the universe is one of the methodologies that many of these spiritual traditions have taught to us in order to get back to our origin. This is very important to keep in mind, because whenever we are trying to make sense or to understand any level of reality, any ontological realm, we have to do it in such a way that we must consider as a cause of this level of reality, or on the other hand, we may explain this level of reality as a manifestation, as a consequence of a level of reality that has to be of a higher order, so it can be contained within it. For instance, we cannot understand human beings just as energy if we are at the same time alive, so there is life involved, and we are conscious, so there is consciousness involved. We cannot reduce consciousness or life to energy. If we are alive and conscious, then in the seed of our own selves, just because of a logical requirement, we must be some sort of manifestation of something that must be at the same time not only energy, but life and consciousness. And notwithstanding how marvelous and complex our biological system is, notwithstanding how much wonder we may feel when we begin to understand all the neurobiological processes involved in any mental or cognitive process, we cannot reduce the existence of mind or experience to these neurobiological processes. We may understand with quite subtle detail all the neurobiological, neuroelectrical levels of the way in which our brain works. But even though we may understand that, there's still a breach that we cannot solve, the breach of what's the relationship between these material aspects with mind. On the other hand, is it really possible to state that mind and consciousness are really an epiphenomena, are really just the result of this biological complexity? For me, that sounds quite absurd, because from a logical perspective, as we mentioned before, we cannot pretend that there is something in any consequence or manifestation that was not previously contained in the antecedent or the cause. So how can we state, or how can we posit biology as the basis for consciousness? For me, as for all the Indian and Chinese, Japanese and Egyptian traditions, it's quite the contrary. Matter is a manifestation of consciousness. If we accept this hierarchical levels of organization of reality, and if we accept that the one which is closest to what we may call spirit or consciousness is a level of reality of higher order than the one that we may observe at a material or energetical level, if we accept that, then we probably have to ask ourselves, what do we have to do in order to get back to our real nature, which might be closer to consciousness than to matter? If we think like that, then we may appreciate the role that every level of knowledge has in life. We may understand the crucial role that science plays, as well as philosophy, and as well as spirituality or metaphysics, because each one of them deals with some of these levels of manifestation, whether it is matter and energy, life, consciousness, or the beyond consciousness, being itself. From that perspective, this is an invitation to integrate the different dimensions of knowledge into just one big effort to understanding what we do here in life and what all this is about. This is an invitation to reflect upon the fact that we cannot reduce the complexity of the reality of the cosmos and ourselves to just one dimension. Least a dimension which is just so basic or simple as matter or energy. Sometimes I feel that neuroscience is the new religion, in the sense that we tend to believe, I think in a wrong manner, that if we understand the brain, then we understand consciousness. That doesn't make sense to me. If we understand the brain, what we understand is just that, the brain, the way in which consciousness manifests, the tool through which consciousness manifests itself, but not the root of it. And I know that for many people this might sound absurd, and I accept that point of view. I can understand the rationale behind that point of view, but I invite you to question some of the dogmas of our postmodern world. And one of those dogmas, one of the main one, is that it is matter when it reaches some level of complexity that then life and eventually consciousness arises. I wonder whether that's true or not. And if you check the history of philosophy and the history of thought, all along history, you will find that in very ancient and wise traditions in the eastern part of our planet, they don't think like that. For them, it's quite evident that consciousness, life, and matter are the manifestation of something that goes beyond our conception of the world. So what's finite and measurable is just a partial reflection of something infinite that goes much beyond concepts and form, which is ineffable.